Mr. Speaker, Howard Lutnick had said that he had cut off ties with Jeffrey Epstein in 2005, but the documents that came out contradict that. Democrats and Thomas Massie say he should resign. Do you think that Howard Lutnick should resign?
No, of course not. It's absurd. Howard Lutnick is a great Commerce Secretary. He's done an extraordinary job for the country, and Thomas Massie should stop doing political games.
Do you have any concerns about Lutnick's ties with Epstein?
I don't know anything about that. I know Howard as an individual, and I trust his word on it. I mean, I don't know of the timing and all that. I'm not sure. You have to ask others.
Do you have any interest in...
MAGA Republicans are getting even more desperate as they're seeing Howard Lutnick flailing on Capitol Hill after saying he's never met Epstein after that one encounter because Epstein's disgusting. He's now saying, actually, I went to the island. That's what he testified in the Senate. I brought my children. I brought my kids. But, you know, that was it. So when I said the last time that I only saw him once and I was so grossed out, I never saw him again. Well, I've actually seen him other times as well. Also, 38,000 references to Donald Trump, 5,000 documents that he's in. And now we're learning even more grotesque details of what lies beneath some of these unlawful redactions that Trump's DOJ made, including Trump being underneath these redactions with Trump's lawyers, speaking with Epstein's lawyers, apparently like coordinating part of the defense and saying that, well, you know, Epstein and Trump, you know, Epstein was never actually a member of Mar-a-Lago, so he couldn't have possibly been banned, but he was a guest, so he could show up whenever. Let's just take a look at what's going down on Capitol Hill right now, because you know that the MAGA leaders need to step things up. And of course, they're going to attack immigrants and they're going to just try to instill fear in the American people. So here you have MAGA Republican Congress member Tom Emmer as part of this press conference. This was their big press conference this morning. It was Emmer, it was McClain, it was MAGA Mike Johnson. Watch what Emmer was doing. Here, play this clip.
He's always got to be
Pedophiles, rapists, murderers, and drug traffickers. These are just a few of the criminal illegal aliens that the brave men and women of Immigration and Customs Enforcement have taken off the streets of Minneapolis in the recent months and weeks.
Yeah, don't look at the pedos, the rapists, the traffickers. In the Epstein files, we're going to spend today attacking immigrants and saying that all immigrants are murderers, and this is why ICE and Border Patrol, Gestapo need to be out there invading your cities. Then we heard from Congresswoman, MAGA Republican Congresswoman McClain. Here's what she had to say. Let's play it.
Why aren't more people outraged? I don't get it. I gotta share with you, I don't get it. These folks are monsters. They're criminals. They murder. They sexually assault young women, minors. And you know what the Democrats wanted? Let's release them in their communities. And let's celebrate the criminals. Let's villainize the ICE agents and celebrate the people who are raping your children.
And again, she's not talking about the Epstein. They want you to not look at that. They want to say that Democrats are supporting people raping children. Just think about what they're saying, so that ICE and Border Patrol can invade your cities and kill you, while Trump and the people you see there are literally covering up a child sex trafficking ring. And the Karen energy, as Aaron Rupert said, is off the charts here. Here, play this clip.
I am beyond frustrated watching a media that is so obsessed with tearing down President Trump that they are willfully ignoring the millions of criminal illegals that Joe Biden has allowed to cross.
And then, of course, MAGA Mike just doesn't know anything when he's asked questions. So what do you think about all the federal judges out there saying that the Trump regime and DHS is just violating every court order, missing every deadline? You got to comment. You're the Speaker of the House. You want to comment on that?
Mr. Speaker.
There's reporting this morning that federal judges are increasingly frustrated with DHS for defying court orders in cases involving ICE detainees. Should the administration be able to miss deadlines or slow walk proceedings in cases it disagrees with? And should Congress act to shield the constitutional authority of the judiciary?
Look, I'm not going to comment on the report I haven't seen. I would doubt that the rest of that. As first I've heard of it, if this was a big problem, you probably would have heard that a lot more.
I want to bring in now Corbin Trent. Y'all have seen Corbin on some of the clips we've shown here on the MeidasTouch network where he's appeared on Fox, pushing back and showing the truth on that network. He's the publisher of America's Undoing, starting a super PAC called The Fight Worth Having, a former communications director for AOC, worked in both Bernie campaigns, and I love when Bernie's a guest on the MeidasTouch podcast. I love those conversations. From Northeast Tennessee, great to have you here, Corbin. Corbin, when I show those clips at the beginning, what's your overall? This is what they do every single day, and the propaganda has reached a level beyond parody. And as I've said before, this would be SNL worthy, except this is really impacting like our lives. Like these people up there are really hurting us, but it's farcical.
Yeah, it's as you mentioned, as you're playing these clips, it makes sense if these people were referring to the Epstein dumps, if they were referring to all the files that are coming out that are showing that people have been systematically abusing women across the country, people in powerful positions. But that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about, you notice that they had 4 pieces of paper that they came up with. It wasn't from lack of trying, I'm sure, that they only had 4 pieces of paper. The fact, we all know this, your audience knows this, that immigrants are far less likely than native-born citizens to commit crimes. That is not who we need to protect ourselves from. It actually turns out that we need to protect ourselves from the rich, the powerful, the oligarchs, the Epsteins of the world, the Trumps of the world. This is who we need to protect ourselves from. And unfortunately, the courts are tied up so much right now that they're not able to do what they need to do. And besides the fact, you got an administration that's ignoring the orders anyway. So Congress or the people are the only things that can step between, I think, an out of control regime and where we're headed.
When I see those people there, and I just see, I refer to it like, I'm like, take away the politics for a second, because I don't think they believe anything. I just see a bunch of sociopaths who wake up and say, how can we further hoist up our Führer and our dear leader, our Kim Jong-un that we want here, which is their Donald Trump, and them and Fox, and you appear, I call them state regime media. When you appear on them, there is no principle or value or underlying thing. It certainly ain't the Second Amendment, because they said that Alex Preddy didn't have the right to conceal carry and deserves to die. They've had lots of guests who say that. Ain't the First Amendment, ain't the Fourth Amendment, 10th Amendment, it's not states' rights. It's none of it. At the end of the day, these people just exist because they will. And by the way, this is what we've seen throughout history. It's not a new thing that people want to hoist up authoritarians. It's just a weird thing to see it here and the tactics that are used to do it in 2025, 2026.
It's disarming, I think, in a way, because it seems so unlikely that it would happen. We've all said it can happen anywhere. We knew this, in our brains. You can logically know that this can happen anywhere. But it is sort of unnerving to see it happening. And one of the things that makes it so hard to react to, I believe, is that life goes on. Like, the cars are still going down the street. People still go to work. The bills still have to be paid. Kids still go to school. So you're living in this moment where our infrastructure, our social infrastructure, our societal infrastructure, and our electoral infrastructure are collapsing. And it seems normal, because life seems normal for most people. Now, that's not the case for a lot of our immigrant friends and immigrant brothers and sisters. It's not the case for a lot of people, but for the overwhelming majority of Americans, life seems to just go on. So it's hard to get yourself, I think, steeled in the way that you need to be in order to respond to the situation. And hopefully, we've seen the No Kings protests. We've seen some other, protests. I think, there was a congressperson just the other day that called for a national strike if Donald Trump keeps insisting on nationalizing the elections. The problem is, I don't know where their limit is. There's no limit for MAGA Mike, as you've shown in these clips here. There is no limit for the administration supporters in Congress or the administrator supporters on the judiciary. The limit's going to have to come from the opposition party and the American people. And, unfortunately, that's one of the things that I'm really disappointed in, is seeing the opposition party's lack of, I think, ability to respond in a way that can really put the brakes on things. We're still funding the government. We're having a negotiation about DHS, but like, how can you continue funding a government that is harming the American people? That is weaponizing itself against us. I want to see more of that.
And one of the, I think, really kind of cutting and incisive narrative explanations you give, just based on your background, being in Northeast Tennessee, and explaining really how Appalachia voters moved away from Democrats and moved, into MAGA and bought this crap. One of the things being in the polls right now, though, is Trump is underwater significantly amongst non-college educated voters now. He's -9, -10 in some of the latest polling there. That doesn't specifically mean that those voters are going to automatically go and trust Democrats. They may be coming independents, or they may be. Explain kind of what you're seeing, though, right now in this moment. And because there does seem to be, to your point, an opportunity here, though, if the opposition understands what's actually taking place.
Well, I mean, I think we have to learn from our history, just like we learn where we're headed from our history. We learn that there's an alternative that can happen from our history too. So in the 30s, Europe went one direction, but America went a different direction. We were in a very similar circumstance in America at the end of the beginning of the 30s. And the Republicans had a slim majority in the House and the Senate. They had the presidency. Very similar to what you got now. And then in just a few cycles, Democrats had a supermajority in the House and in the Senate, and they had the presidency, which they held for 4 terms. So how did they do that, though? They did that by delivering with a grand vision for the country. It was called the New Deal. It was a big systematic shift in our economy and the way things worked, and it transformed the lives of American people in a deep and significant way. And that coalition, the New Deal coalition, held together for 40 or 50 years. Now, you talk about how Appalachia has shifted and how Tennessee has shifted. The interesting thing for me, when you look at the voting history of, say, Tennessee, for example, Bill Clinton won this state twice. And Obama only underperformed Bill Clinton by a couple of points, like 3 points in the state of Tennessee. So the Tennessee Democratic Party and the Tennessee voters didn't really turn their back on the Democratic Party until Obama's second term. And then further with Biden, and they turned towards Trump. And I think the thing about Trump originally was that he gave a vision. It was a dark vision of immigrants taking your jobs. It was a vision of corporations and politicians stealing your means of making a living. There were all these things that were going on with it, but in there was embedded the hope that it could be changed, that if he were going in there with a chainsaw and tearing things down, that something better would be rebuilt. Now, unfortunately, people fell for it and they got duped. But the problem is that nobody's saying the kind of the level of understanding that Trump had of where Americans' minds were, mostly the Democratic Party doesn't have. And I think Gavin Newsom is a good example where he's coming up now with this RFK alternative. He's going to be the anti-RFK, but he's not underscoring that, hey, actually, Big Pharma does have too much control over our healthcare system. Hey, actually, our healthcare system is screwed up. We're eating all kinds of stuff that's illegal in other countries. So the Democratic Party, unfortunately, is too responsive. They want to be anti-Trump, anti-RFK, anti-this, anti-that, as opposed to having a really strong vision of their own that they can then win the hearts and minds of the American people with. And I think that's critical. And in Tennessee, East Tennessee specifically, this is my region was transformed by the New Deal. We got TVA dams. There's dozens of them in this whole area. We've got the Manhattan Project built Oak Ridge, the interstate highway system, the rural electrification system, put electricity here when it didn't exist. So this area actually is ripe for, a new vision, a new bold vision for what America can be. But, they've got to be leaders out there that are promoting it. And right now, unfortunately, Shoykat Chakrabarty in San Francisco is the only one I see that's really articulating that vision.
So, Corbin, how do you cut through, though, the powerful right-wing echo chambers like State Regime Media, Fox, like CBS, all the, and other corporate media, which also pretty much bends the knee now, where something like the Green New Deal, which is actually a job creator, or, former President Biden's manufacturing plans, which actually was starting to create manufacturing jobs, is viewed as horrible and socialistic, and and those terms are used despite the fact that we have socialism for billionaires right now under the Trump regime. It's welfare for billionaires, and but they weaponize these words and these terms, and they scare people not just from Appalachia but across the country on projects that are benefiting them. And so you've been on state regime media quite a few times, and you push back, and you often leave those hosts there kind of frozen when they struggle to grapple with the common sense that you're saying. So what would you say to our audience though right now? And I know it's a macro question that may not be able to be answered, but how do you combat that right now and win the hearts and minds, not just the people in Appalachia, but across the country with all of that propaganda out there that tells people vote against your interest?
Well, I think two things. I think one is Democrats often self-censor. They sort of they try to analyze what the voters are going to think, and then they think to themselves, "How can I say this? What should I say? These people are going to react this way." Instead of just saying what they believe, what they think, right? Which is how you come across as genuine. I've had so many politicians ask me, "How do I sound more genuine?" And the answer is be genuine, right? And so I think that's one of the things is just say what you believe. If you believe that this is the way to fix healthcare, if you believe that we need a public option and not just insurance, but also in the actual delivery of care, if you believe that we need to have a better system for, generating our energy, just say it. Instead of assuming what's going to happen down the line because of this poll said that or that poll said that, you can change what people believe. Donald Trump has bought into like a dozen companies, like 10, 15% shares of a dozen companies. And, that would be called socialism in any normal circumstances, but he's just done it. And I think that's one. And then I think two, outside of that is to make sure that you're taking this message everywhere you can. Well, you got MeidasTouch Network. There are a lot of places that are competitive with, you've got these startups that are competing with the national state media, and you've got to learn how to go where that's happening and not be afraid to speak where it needs to be spoken. But also go on Fox and talk about it, but don't don't try to convert your message to that audience. Take an audience, the message that you believe in. And I think it gets through more easily that way.
Before we go, any issues that you want to bring attention to our 6 million subscribers that you just think are not getting, much more, that need more attention? When I have a guest like you on, I know just even based on, your support of Bernie, at the very beginning too, to me, that's where the country is, right? I mean, there's a reason why the Fight the Oligarch tours right now are getting the biggest amount, getting the biggest audiences right now. So just as you're seeing the future, as you're looking ahead, what's on your mind? What should we be thinking about?
So there's a group called New Consensus that I worked with to start the Green New Deal, and they've got a thing called Mission for America. And one of the things it looks at is one of the most important things I think we're missing, whether it's healthcare, education, housing, or whatever, is that the Democratic Party and progressives and so many others think that what we need to do is tax billionaires, tax corporations, then use that tax revenue to invest in into the existing healthcare system or the existing educational system and things. And I think that what it misses, that sort of idea misses, is that if you put money into an already broken healthcare system that's not creating more doctors, more nurses, more hospitals, it's not creating the supply that we need, then all you're going to get is more of the same thing, which is consolidation and very rich corporations. So for me, the message that I think is not getting out there in the way that it should is that we have to actually take some more ownership of the economy as the American people, and we have to start producing more things. They touched on this in abundance. But one of the things I think was left out is the fact that the American people have to own a share of it. We used to own about 50% of our healthcare delivery, the hospitals, the clinics. All of that was owned by counties, municipalities, states, and the federal government. Same was true with, again, I mentioned TVA. We owned that here in Tennessee, in the Tennessee Valley. We owned the electrical production capacity. And I think that's the only way you're going to be able to compete with these oligarchs and monopolies and oligopies is if you create your own massive vertically integrated systems that are competitive. And I think it'll restore competition. It'll restore access. And I think that's one of the things that I'd like to see more of. And they're talking about that, like I said, at New Consensus, at the Mission for America. And again, Shoykat Chakrabarty's pushing the heck out of it.
Corbin Trent. I hope you come back. Let's chat more. He's the publisher of America's Undoing. Everybody check it out. Looking forward to seeing what the new Super PAC Fight Worth Having is going to be doing coming soon. And AOC's former comms director. Great to see you, Corbin.
Thank you so much.
Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.